I can't bear it. Find out what I mean on this episode of Pushback.
Go, 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 Jonny, go, 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 Jonny, go, 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 Jonny, go, go.
If you're concerned about the direction our culture is heading, then maybe it's time to push back.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jonny, and this is another episode of Pushback. I'm continuing a series really talking about our children. I believe that there is a connection that we all share no matter where we live on the planet, that we care about our kids. We care about their prosperity. We care about their purpose. We care about their health and their well-being. I think that's true for every human being. It might not be 100%, but it has to be very, very close. And we can feel emotion about things that affront us, things that come against us. We can have emotion about that. We can have emotion about 9/11 when our country is attacked. We can have emotion when a former president is almost assassinated. I, as an emergency room physician, can have emotion when I have a patient who has been physically abused or a child. Those are all emotions that are connected to my life and the things that we experience here on this planet. But there is no emotion that even could compare if somebody came against my family, my wife or my children. If that would happen, that's a completely different level of emotion. Nothing gets between my relationship, my children's health, my children's well-being. And that's the way it should be. That's the way we're wired because they are ours. And I believe as we look at the things that are affecting this world and the things that specifically affect our children, I'm concerned that these things that are coming against them now more than ever in history is actually killing our kids. It's killing a generational mindset here in our country and in our culture. And I'm determined to go after that. That's the purpose of this podcast. And I do everything I can to not be negative. On the other hand, we have to expose what's there so that we can bring kingdom light to fix it, to be the answer. The Spirit of the Lord lives within us, and it is His Holy Spirit that injects Himself into every aspect of human society and culture and brings healing and wholeness in life. And I believe that with all of my heart. And so I began a series initially talking to parents very specifically. Then I spent 3 months moving on and talking about what I call pseudoscientists or the area of science and education in our children's lives. And then I moved on now to politicians. I'm in sort of the third phase of this series. And I know that politicians tend to more react to the electorate than actually set something that they truly believe in their hearts. They are amazingly movable. However, I believe the policies that they create, or at least the room or avenue that we allow as the citizenry or as those who are even kingdom-minded people, they can move in with policy that is harmful, that is detrimental to our children. And that should matter. When their mindset is a political mindset, which is just get me elected and then get me elected again, if that's the whole mindset, there are a lot of freebies and bright, shiny lights and shiny things that can attract people's attention and get them to vote for them. But when we have a mindset, a generational mindset about what's the best for the next generation, then I believe policies actually shift to that end. And there's been a ludicrous number of policies that have come out over the last couple of years that have made us just scratch our heads. Like, what is going on? It defies reason. It defies common sense. It defies basic humanity. How does this happen? It's because there's room for it. And we need to shut the door on that room. And we need to be the ones that are so proactive and noisy that it no longer has a place, no longer has space to operate, where morality and goodness once again rule across the land. That was a big intro. So today I'm talking very specifically about this whole notion of climate change. Now, I've done many different podcasts on this topic, and I've received interesting pushback even from some of my listeners, which I've really taken to heart, because the point of bringing this up isn't that we don't take care of our environment. It's not that we turn a blind eye to the things that are happening in this world, and also not dismissing the notion that we are the caretakers of this world. So all of that is true, and I want to say that at the very beginning. But we can't falsify or even lie to each other or to the public about what is happening here on this earth, even from a scientific standpoint, because that never bears fruit. It's only the truth that sets us free. So we can do good, and we can narrow the avenue of where we need to walk to make this a healthier environment for us and for our children. I'm on board 100% for that. What I'm not on board with is the alarmists who are creating and perpetuating claims scientifically and definitely emotionally that simply aren't true. And that never really helps us. That doesn't move the needle. It doesn't change the way that we think. It doesn't help us progress. And in fact, I would like to submit to you that these policies, these environmental policies that are coming out of Washington is actually creating such harm to us personally, but definitely to our children. Now, this podcast is entitled I Can't Bear It, but it's BEAR, of course, and it has to do with polar bears. Love polar bears, because this reminds me of so much of what has been talked about and just the way the government often approaches us as citizens. July 31st, just a few weeks ago, an article was released by Bjorn Lomborg at the Wall Street Journal, who wrote a short but wonderful article about recent findings and prior claims. He wrote, "Whatever happened to polar bears? They used to be all climate campaigners could talk about, but now they're essentially absent from the headlines. Over the past 20 years, climate activists have elevated various stories of climate catastrophe, then quietly dropped them without apology when the opposing evidence becomes overwhelming. The only constant is the scare tactics. Protesters used to dress up as polar bears. Al Gore's 2006 film An Inconvenient Truth depicted a sad cartoon polar bear floating away to its death. The Washington Post warned in 2004 that the species could face extinction, and the World Wildlife Fund's chief scientist claimed some polar bears would be unable to reproduce by 2012. Then in the 2010s, campaigners stopped talking about them. After years of misrepresentation, it finally became impossible to ignore the mountain of evidence showing that the global polar bear population has increased substantially. Whatever negative effect climate change had was swamped by the reduction in hunting of polar bears. The population has risen from around 12,000 in the 1960s to about 26,000. The same thing has happened with activists' outcry about the Australians' Great Barrier Reef. For years, they shouted that the reef was being killed off by rising sea temperatures. After a hurricane extensively damaged the reef in 2009, official Australians' estimates of the percent of reef covered in coral reached a record low in 2012. The media overflowed with stories about the Great Reef Catastrophe, and scientists predicted the coral cover would be reduced by another half by 2022. The Guardian even published an obituary in 2014. The latest official statistics show a completely different picture. For the past 3 years, the Great Barrier Reef has had more coral cover than at any point since the records began, with 2024 setting a new record. This good news gets a fraction of the coverage that the panicked predictions did. More recently, Green campaigners were warning that small Pacific islands would drown as sea levels rose. In 2019, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres flew all the way to Tuvalu in the South Pacific for a Time magazine cover shot. Wearing a suit, he stood up to his thighs in the water behind the headline, "Our Sinking Planet." The accompanying article warned the island and others like it would be struck off the map entirely by rising sea levels. About a month ago, the New York Times finally shared what it called, quote, surprising, end quote, climate news. Almost all Atoll islands are stable or increasing in size. In fact, scientific literature has documented this for more than a decade. While rising sea levels do erode land, additional sand from old coral is washed up on low-lying shores. Extensive studies have long shown this acceleration is stronger than climate-caused erosion, meaning the land area of Tuvalu and many other small islands is increasing. I'm glad to give you the good news. He writes, today, killer heat waves are the new climate horror story. In July, President Biden claimed extreme heat is the #1 weather-related killer in the United States. He is wrong by a factor of 25. While extreme heat kills nearly 6,000 Americans each year, cold kills 152,000, of which 12,000 die from extreme cold. Even including deaths from moderate heat, the toll comes to less than 10,000. Despite rising temperatures, age-standardized extreme heat deaths have actually declined in the United States by almost 10% a decade, and globally by even more, largely because the world is growing more prosperous. This is going to be key. That allows more people to afford air conditioners and other technologies that protect them from the heat. The petrified tone of heat wave coverage twists policy illogically. Whether from heat or cold, the most sensible way to save people from temperature-related deaths would be ensure access to cheap, reliable electricity. That way, it wouldn't be only the rich who could afford to keep safe from blistering or frigid weather. Unfortunately, much of climate policy makes affordable energy all the harder to obtain. Activists do the world a massive disservice by refusing to acknowledge facts that challenge their intensely doom-ridden worldview. There is ample evidence that man-made emissions cause some changes in climate. And climate economics generally find that the costs of these effects outweigh the benefits. But the net result is nowhere near catastrophic. The costs of all the extreme policies campaigners push for are much worse. All told, politicians across the world are now spending more than $2 trillion annually, far more than the estimated costs from climate change that these policies prevent each year. Scare tactics leave everyone, especially young people, distressed and despondent. This is what studies have shown. Fear leads to poor policy choices that further frustrate the public, and the ever-changing narrative of disasters erodes public trust. What a paragraph. Telling half-truths while piously pretending to, quote, follow the science, end quote, benefits activists with their fundraising, generates clicks for media outlets, and helps climate-concerned politicians rally their bases. But it leaves all of us poorly informed and worse off. See, this is a very important article in its simplicity. See, we have to understand that fear tactics and scare tactics to accomplish an agenda is not an effective way of moving the populace. In fact, the Bible says, 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear. It doesn't come from God. It's not part of his culture or his climate, no pun intended, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. See, I've mentioned this many times before. If you make a claim that is calling for change, you have the burden of proof. Now, there is nothing wrong with making a claim that requires a change. I do this almost every week on my podcast. But the burden of proof is on me then to submit to you, to give you the evidence of why that change is important and it's critical. See, I care about the environment It is definitely our responsibility. But the ones who are making this claim to result in a catastrophic change in our budget and in our policy, you better be right. And this article shows in a simple way that there are so many claims that are being haphazardly thrown out that have simply been wrong. Now, if they were scientific about it, if they were truthful about it, they would have come back and said, we were wrong about the polar bears. We were wrong about the Great Barrier Reef. And they can still, I'd actually have more trust in their science if they would just be consistent in extending truth to us, the readers, the ones who are receiving the actual science. Because we disagree with them or because they're wrong doesn't make us science deniers. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The crux of science is investigation, is to find out whether what you are claiming is actually true. But they should be claims. They should be what's called a hypothesis, where we are hypothesizing that the Great Barrier Reef by 2022 will be the half the size. That's the hypothesis. We are making a claim. To write an obituary and say this will actually happen and that the polar bears will be wiped off the face of the earth is an outlandish claim, not based on fact, but based on agenda and policy. See, there's a difference. So you can make hypotheses in science, but then you need to back them up and you need to say what we said about the polar bears actually wasn't right. However, there might be other things that we still think is true. But according to this article and according to the way I look at it, there's a loss of credibility. We don't believe anything that they say anymore. And that's not okay. And so for politicians to hitch their bandwagon to this and then try to stiff arm the rest of the populace saying you're science deniers or you simply don't care about the next generation is completely misunderstanding what's right in front of their face. So I want to be very clear that I believe that this world and this environment is our responsibility. We learn it in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. God said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Our responsibility. And in chapter 2, he said, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. These are powerful verses about our role and responsibility here on this earth and the way the Father created it to be from the beginning of time. And I want to make very clear that I take that extremely seriously. See, we are the answer here on this earth. In Romans, it says, for the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. That's us. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in pains of childbirth until now. Creation is even looking to us to be the answer, to bring the light and the life of the heavens experience, that we are heaven's ambassadors on earth, and we are supposed to bring that here to this planet. See, we talk about the next generation, and that's what we're referring to. See, this is more than protecting our kids from smog or carbon emissions. And we can look at that, and if you want to give me hard data about what's happening, I want to hear it. But it can't be conjecture, and they can't be lies. Studies have shown that infants and young children are being exposed to news reports about climate. And this is leading to anxiety, sleep troubles, PTSD, disruptive cognitive development, and major depressive disorder. When we cry the sky is falling and we're all doomed or we're going to turn into the zombie apocalypse, this creates an emotional response to our children. This is how we're killing our children. But it goes way deeper than that. It goes deeper than the fact that we're scaring them to death. We need to stop lying to our children. We must stop lying to them. We need to give them real facts and real data, or just protect their hearts completely. We need to stop lying to them about origins and climate and sex and biology. These are lies that are being propagated to our children. And they're not stupid. They're entering into their psyche, and they're too young and immature to handle it. And interestingly, I believe with my whole heart that our children are much more likely to be adversely affected by poverty and economic stress than they ever are by carbon emissions. Now, you can prove me wrong. I'd be willing to hear the data on this. But I really believe that there are children in Africa right now that aren't stressing about the latest hurricane or polar bears. They need food. They need prosperity. That's what they're looking for. And I think it's interesting in this article how it brings about an economic discussion. This Green New Deal is based on lies. And it's led to an economic disaster, leading to unprecedented accumulation of debt, taxes, and inflation. We've all felt it. This is because of spending on something that's based on a house of cards. I believe that problem will destroy our children's future faster than global warming, which is what we should expect to see after the flood anyway. China, Russia, India, they're not even on board with this. And yet we're willing to bankrupt our economy and our children's way of life. You realize that inflation affects the poor much more than it affects the rich. When things become out of hand and we lose our purchasing power. This is not economically viable. And the technology that's coming out, even in this green policy, is bankrupting us. It's not working. It hasn't been economically effective. And so the result of that now, because we've jumped in with both feet politically, there's going to now be bailouts and subsidies and increase in taxes. And the crazy part, and the part that blows my mind, is it actually is depleting resources. Batteries don't fall from the sky. They involve mining and resources, limited resources, rather than tapping into unlimited resources. Now, underneath this whole discussion, of course, is not everybody suffers from bailouts and subsidies. The ones who receive those are the ones who are making the deals in the back rooms that are keeping money in their pockets. See, why does the government mandate things? We've been hearing that word a lot, mandates. It's because they don't feel like they have the ability to educate and inform. If something is so obvious and so based on facts and science that we should simply be able to inform the public, and they would most likely then make the right informed decisions. This goes back to our whole vaccine mandate discussion. I was an advocate for the vaccine. I was not an advocate for the mandate. And when you have to mandate something, it shows your inadequacy in actually educating the public to do the right thing. And so the only way to enact your policy then is to control. And it comes back to power and control. That's what the political spirit is. It's about power and control, to exercise power and to control you. And because they are uncertain whether they can control you, and the reason is because the data is iffy. It's because it's based on lies and their inability to communicate. So their only option then is to control you and to mandate you. See, politicians and policies, they do affect our children whether we like it or not. So we need to engage them and hold them accountable. We need to, excuse the expression, get in their face and talk to them about polar bears. Let them admit that they were wrong about that. Let them admit that they were wrong about the data that they are releasing to us, that they need to give us better data to convince us, and that we won't move forward on policies that are based on lies. Doesn't mean that our environment is perfect. That's not a lie. Our environment needs improvement. There are things that we can target and use money effectively to clean up our land and air. I'm all for that. But you have to give me even then the data that what we're doing, what we're using our money for is effective, safe, purposeful, and will keep our economy moving and give people access to get out of poverty and to do the things, because once we are economically stable, we have much more power to actually do it rather than continue to buy products from China and borrow from China. It's not a sustainable plan. And this isn't just a politic talking point. This is about our children. I really believe that. It's about our children, and that's what gets me fired up. That's what gets me even angry. That people could actually lie to our children, bring about stress, anxiety, and fear, not based on actual fact and truth, but based on agenda. See, freedom is tied to truth. The Bible says so. It's truth that will set you free. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking from scientists, all I'm asking from politicians. Show me the truth. Show me the truth. And the truth will set us free. My friends, we need to stay alert. We need to stay active, and we can't become complacent. So let's go together now to set and shape the culture.